As much as Donald Trump tries to use Charlie Kirk's death for his own political gain, he doesn't actually want people looking too closely at what really happened. His goal is to pressure liberals into taking the blame for political violence in America. But the truth tells a very different story. A new FBI report is now shedding light on what really went on and challenging the narrative Trump has been pushing in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting. This report completely undercuts his claims, and we're going to break it all down. But before we get into that, if you could take a quick moment to like this video, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. It really helps support the channel. Now, before diving into the details of that explosive report, let's start with the man at the center of the cover-up, Kash Patel, who has come under heavy criticism, not only for his role in this, but also for his broader failures in leadership called out here by Representative Jasmine Crockett.
But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem. The one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
From the very beginning, I have pushed back against the attempt to glorify Charlie Kirk as something he simply was not. He wasn't a civil rights leader, and he wasn't someone fighting for free speech. What he cared about most was power and profit. His politics were about performance, not about creating real change or improving lives. He built a movement rooted in division. And that same division and hostility are exactly what we see continuing from the right in the wake of his death. And here's the truth. When liberals remain silent, when elected Democrats stay quiet out of fear, it allows Republicans to control the narrative and push their agenda forward. That's exactly what's happening right now. They're using some of the most outrageous arguments imaginable to justify their authoritarian project. And those arguments fall apart under real scrutiny. But before I show you just how wrong they are, let's take a listen to what's being pushed on Fox.
It's just a shame. And he should know better as a grown man in show business. People are acting like, you know, he's just some homeless guy screaming things on the corner. This guy is at ABC. When's the last time ABC tolerated much, let alone this?
Right. You know, I'm watching some of the liberal networks. I've never heard them care about the Constitution so much. Their First Amendment. This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. This has to do with the business decision, as you noted. And for all the concern about the First Amendment, I mean, they're apoplectic, Jesse. What about all the amendments that Charlie Kirk lost? Because Charlie Kirk has no amendments right now. None. And the outrage I see over Jimmy Kimmel, I wish I would have seen that for the death of a father and a husband who should still be here.
Yeah, they got their priorities all out of whack.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what they're doing right now. They are making up a false memory of Charlie Kirk. They are spinning every story to attach itself to him because they think that this is a moment for them to win. And what are they winning on the back of a guy they never really cared about? Charlie Kirk was funded by billionaire. He was their puppet. Billionaires will always find another Charlie Kirk. Donald Trump will find some other reason to extend his authoritarian project. But right now, the way he is doing so is by blaming the left. And any Democrat who isn't fighting back is complicit, especially in the wake of this new report. No evidence found yet of ties between Charlie Kirk's shooting and left-wing groups. Official says 3 people familiar with the federal probe into Kirk's assassination told NBC News that investigators have yet to find a link between the alleged shooter and left-wing groups. The federal investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk has yet to find a link between the alleged shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, and left-wing groups on which President Trump and his administration have pledged to crack down on after the killing. One person familiar with the federal investigation said that thus far there is no evidence connecting the suspect with any left-wing groups. Every indication so far is that this was one guy who did one really bad thing because he found Charlie Kirk's ideology personally offensive. In addition, 2 of the people familiar with the probe said it may be difficult to charge Robinson at the federal level for Kirk's killing. While the third source said that there is still an expectation that some kind of federal charge is filed against Robinson. Over the past week, Donald Trump has done nothing but point fingers at the left, blaming liberals for everything. But that narrative is simply not true. While details about the shooter are still emerging, what we do know is that the FBI seems far more interested in trying to create a link between left-leaning groups or even pro-trans groups and this tragedy, using it as justification to target everyday liberals across the country, silence dissent, and clamp down on free speech. This is exactly why we cannot allow Charlie Kirk to be recast as anything other than what he was. Someone who built division, not unity. If we play into their narrative and treat him like a cultural figure who made America better, we are essentially validating Trump's false claim that the left is to blame. That is simply wrong. The reality is that Donald Trump has fueled political violence, and the Republican Party has spent decades blocking meaningful reforms to protect Americans from gun violence. I refuse to let anyone rewrite that truth or force liberals to carry blame that isn't theirs. That's why I was glad to see a strong voice in the Democratic Party, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, push back against a new bill designed to honor Charlie Kirk, a bill that, unfortunately, too many Democrats supported. She stood up and called it out clearly.
Today, the Republican House majority brought to the floor a resolution honoring, quote, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk's assassination was a horrific and vile attack and incident of political violence. And condemning the depravity of Kirk's brutal murder is a straightforward matter, one that is especially important to help stabilize an increasingly unsafe and volatile political environment where everyday people feel more at risk. We can deeply disagree and come together as a country to denounce the horror of this killing. And it is not a license for the abuse of power and whitewashing of American history. Today's resolution only underscores the majority's recklessness by choosing to author this condemnation and honoring on a purely partisan basis, instead of uniting Congress in this tragedy with one of the many bipartisan options to condemn political violence and Kirk's murder, as we did with the late Melissa Hortman. Instead, the majority proceeded with a resolution that brings great pain to the millions of Americans who endured segregation, Jim Crow, and the legacy of bigotry today. We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake, who after the violent attack on Paul Pelosi claimed that, quote, some amazing patriot, unquote, should bail out his brutal assailant, and accused Jews of controlling, quote, not just the colleges, it's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it, unquote. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans, far from the working tirelessly to promote unity, unquote, asserted by the majority in this resolution. It is equally important that Congress does unite to reject the government's attempt to weaponize this moment into an all-out assault on free speech across the country, all in the name of Charlie Kirk. President Trump and the FCC are now cynically threatening to shut down ABC and any outlets who give airtime to the administration's political critics. This is a disgusting attack on the American people and the very First Amendment rights that define us as a country. It is also the ABC Corporation's responsibility to refuse to embolden and participate in this corruption and escalation of censorship. We continue to pray for Mr. Kirk's family and loved ones in the wake of this terrible act. I am thinking especially of his children and his wife, whose grief cannot be measured. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
Donald Trump is once again using this tragedy as an opportunity to advance his authoritarian agenda. Let me be clear. I am not going to play into the narrative that Charlie Kirk was some kind of hero. He was not. And I'm not going to pretend we should overlook the reality of who he was or ignore the fact that those around him are continuing to push the same harmful politics. His widow, for example, has also stepped into that same right-wing space and is actively involved in political fundraising campaigns. Meanwhile, Trump is trying to twist the response to fit his storyline. He's even suggesting that Jimmy Kimmel's show being suspended was due to public outrage over Kimmel's comments about the Kirk shooting. But if you actually look at what was said, there was nothing outrageous. Kimmel simply pointed out that Trump is exploiting the situation. This wasn't about public backlash, and it wasn't about ratings or economics. It was about pressure and intimidation coming directly from those in power. And here's the double standard. If Trump and his allies want to argue that public outrage should dictate who stays on air, then why is Brian Kilmeade still on Fox News after openly making comments about homeless people that were both dangerous and dehumanizing? Recently, there was even a tragic shooting at a homeless encampment in Minnesota, taking a woman's life. And his words have only added fuel to that climate of hate. If anyone should face consequences, it's voices like his. That's why we need to stay organized and apply consistent public pressure. If they say outrage matters, then let's hold them to their own standard. And as always, if you support this work and want us to keep exposing the truth, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop a blue heart in the comments if you've watched until the end. Keep pushing forward, keep speaking out, and don't let them silence you. And until next time, I will see you soon.